We are going to call to order the January 18th, 2023 Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Before we get started, if everybody would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. Okay. Before we continue on, if I could get an approval of the minutes from the December meeting.
Second.
Moved by Shari and seconded by Brad. Any discussion? Seeing, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next course of business is we're going to determine a quorum. I can see that we've got a full board here, but let me introduce you. To my left is Brad Cohen. My far left is Jay Scheckman. Down below we have Steve Gannon and Patrick McTeague. Down below to the right we have Ms. Shari McCartney and Mary Fertig. To my right we have John Barranco, and to my far right Bill Rotella. So we obviously do have a quorum. Before we get started, if somebody would please swear in. Anybody that wishes to speak tonight needs to stand and take the oath and get sworn in. So please rise, raise your right hand.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give at this board tonight is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You may be seated. Thank you.
Ella, would you do me a favor and introduce who you've got here on behalf of the city?
Absolutely. Good evening. Ella Parker, Urban Design and Planning Manager. With us from staff tonight, we have Assistant City Attorney Patricia St. Ville Joseph. We have our CRA Manager Clarence Woods. Also from the CRA office, Sija Omendrabar. We have our consultant from the Corradino Group, Mark Alvarez. And then from our planning staff, well, actually, we have our director from DSD, Chris Cooper. And then from our planning staff, we have Carlann Devonish, Lorraine Tappan, Jim Hetzel, Trisha Logan, Nancy Garcia, and Adam Schnell. Thank you.
And none of you are getting paid overtime, right? Also with us this evening down below is our prototype services person, Leslie Harmon. So welcome, Leslie. All right. So with that being said, let's get into it. First up on the agenda is case UDP S21038. Good evening, Ms. Crush.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Patricia St. Ville Joseph, Assistant City Attorney. I am here covering for Shari tonight. I'd like to ask the chair if any of the board members have any disclosures before the applicant begins with her presentation.
I was going to do that next, but thank you. So we'll start. Jay, do you want to start? Do you have any disclosures?
Yes, Courtney Crush called me and I spoke on the phone with her.
Brad?
Site visit and a call with Courtney.
Steve? Steve,
That was Steve.
Oh, I was saying.
I'm sorry.
I was saying a site.
I said Brad.
I know. That's why I was answering. I was like, I wasn't sure if I was
Vegas.
talking.
All right.
Sorry, I thought you
Site visit.
All right. Patrick?
Patrick McTeague, site visit and a call from counsel for the applicant.
Sherry?
Spoke with Ms. Crush.
Mary?
Site visit.
Thank you. Bill?
Spoke with Courtney.
John?
Spoke with Courtney.
And I also spoke with Courtney Crush. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, board members, Courtney Crush, on behalf of 1100 Hotels, the property owner of the property located at 1100 West State Road 84. With me this evening is the property owner, Akisha Sanjay, our traffic engineer, Joaquin Vargas, and architect, George White. We're here before the board this evening regarding a proposed parking reduction for the Fairfield Inn and Town Place Suites. The property is located east of I-95 on the south side of State Road 84 in the triangular-shaped larger parcel that you see on the screen. Lucky's also owns and operates other hotels within our city, within South Florida. Our neighbor immediately to the west of the subject property is owned by Lucky's and is, you've probably seen it, an existing Candlewood Suites. Immediately further west is the Holiday Inn Express, also owned and operated by Lucky's Management. For reference, the property owner to our east operates a nightclub, and based on feedback from our neighborhood meetings, Edgewood would love it if someone would be able to buy that property and make it something more attractive. As I mentioned, we have been in long-standing communication with the Edgewood Civic Association before we submitted for the site plan, which went to DRC. We met in October of 2021 with the Edgewood Civic Association's membership. We then proceeded through DRC, which required coordination also with FDOT, since State Road 84 is in fact a state road. Held a public participation meeting with the at the property itself, in case anybody had any questions. We had a presentation, but there were no attendees. We followed that up by going and presenting to the Edgewood Civic Association at their November 2nd, 2022 meeting. Most of the questions that arose were, are you compliant with the zoning district? This is a 8-story hotel. In B1 zoning, which as this board knows, allows taller buildings. And again, the comment came back, will you also consider acquiring the nightclub? Wanted to put on the screen for reference the footprint of the Fairfield Inn. Ground level is actually activated on 3 of its 4 sides, has ground level studio, hotel rooms, as well as a pool on the west, and its entry and porte cochere on the east. Centered, provides generous landscaping. Of note, we also, in working with Ella and Lorraine and their team as part of our FDOT outreach, were able to get FDOT to agree that the existing large shade trees that are on the south side of State Road 84 could remain. Right now, FDOT doesn't allow them if you're proposing it new. So we are before you this evening regarding a parking reduction. The hotel is 172 rooms. As this board is well aware, everywhere except the beach, that requires 1 parking space per hotel room. With Uber, and given the fact that these hotels that are operated on State Road 84 serve the airport, a lot of times serve the airport and then offer guests accommodation for a night because they have to get on a cruise the next day. Our client is very familiar with actual needs. So what was done was Joaquin actually gathered the data of the properties that are immediately to the west, the 2 hotels that the Lucky's Management also owns, and also gathered data from the Crown Plaza, which you may be familiar with, which is on US 1 and State Road 84, which the Lucky's Management also owns and operates. And what Joaquin concluded was that the actual demand on these lots on a daily basis in season 2020, like slightly pre-COVID, was 44 to 55%. And that's what you can see in bold. He concludes that the actual real-world demand is 95 parking spaces. We are proposing 107 parking spaces, which provides a buffer. Again, given the location and the adjacency of its neighbors, we don't believe that will be utilized, but wanted to provide a slight buffer in the event, for some reason, more people choose to not Uber or not take the courtesy shuttle, which the hotel will own and operate and does for all its hotels, 1 shuttle per hotel. Wanted to share with you in context the proposed hotel, just as it will be situated next to its sister hotels to the west. You can see the trees beyond the turn lane. And in the foreground are the existing canopy that also will remain. Elevations just closer up, as I was talking about the ground level units, the entry over on the west, and the surface parking lot. And finally, the FDOT letter, because adequacy is the second code requirement for a parking reduction in addition to demand or projected demand. We did have our site plan circulation reviewed by FDOT. The owner had already constructed a turn lane for the previous two hotels, the Holiday Inn Express, and then the Candlewood, and FDOT said there was no need for one, and in fact, they regretted having asked for it. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions the board may have, as is our team.
Sorry, hang on. Thought I turned that off. All right, sorry about that. Even when it says the volume's off, it still rings. Okay, are there any questions for the applicant's counsel before we open up to a public hearing? Seeing none, is there anybody in the public that would like to speak on this item this evening? Seeing none, we will close the public portion of the hearing and bring it back to the board for discussion.
Could I make a motion to approve?
Let me just make sure there's nobody that wants to comment on it, but if not, you're more than welcome to. Are there
I
anybody that
forgot
wants to
I
comment on it?
forgot Shari's cliff notes for my motion. So
Mary, why don't you go ahead and
just,
make a
oh,
motion?
thank you. She's bringing it to me. They know that I'm going to forget it, so they have it ready.
Sure.
Shar never does that.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Nothing to it.
I move to adopt the resolution approving a site plan level 3 and case number UDP 5 S21038, based on the following findings of fact as presented by the staff and the applicant, and the testimony heard, and hereby find that the application meets the standards and requirements of the ULDR and criteria for the proposed use as cited in the resolution. And this includes any and all conditions that you've agreed to.
Certainly.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Patrick seconded it. Any further discussion before we take it to a vote? All right. Leslie, if you'll call the vote, please.
Yes. Mr. Scheckman,
Yes.
Mr. Baranco,
Yes.
Ms. Fertig,
Yes.
Mr. McTeague,
Yes.
Ms. McCartney,
Yes.
Mr. Gannon,
Yes.
Mr. Rotello,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Chair Weymouth.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, board.
Okay, next item, case number UDP Z22017. This is a city item. Ms. Tappan,
Yes, I'm going to
the
bring
floor is yours.
presentation.
If you could speak into the microphone, please.
Sure. I'm bringing up the PowerPoint. And we'll, for this item, the item is to rezone this area of the Central City CRA, commonly known as the Northwest Quadrant, from RDS 15 to RM 15. So just so everybody's, let me make sure it's going on the screen. Oh, no, it's not on the screen. Keep going. Oh, there it is. Okay, got it. Okay. All right, so here's the map of the area. I think everyone's familiar with it. On the west side, you have Northwest 9th Avenue, Power Line Road. To the north, Northwest 16th Street. To the east, Northwest 7th Avenue. And to the south, Northwest 13th Street. Some have asked why hasn't this been extended further east, but the eastern boundary of this proposed area is actually the eastern boundary of the Central City Community Redevelopment Area. So the proposal is to change the existing zoning, which is RDS 15. The S is a good indicator saying single family. And on the right-hand side, we have the uses And when it comes to the residential uses, with the existing zoning, you're limited to building and rebuilding single-family units, the traditional single-family homes, detached units. On the other hand, the RM15 zoning district allows a number of single-family types of dwelling units, including the traditional single-family detached, duplexes, clusters, zero lot line, townhouses, multifamily, and there's a few other uses that are permitted. Multifamily would be only limited to 13th Street at 9th, just for a small, only on 13th Street. There's a locational restriction on that. Conditional uses include bed and breakfast, mixed-use development, house of worship, school, and so forth. It's important to know that cluster developments and any zero lot line development, which is pretty rare these days, would have to go to the Planning and Zoning Board for review. Oh, sure, yeah. Let me get it in the right position. So here are the dimensional requirements. It's important to see that the height remains the same. There's a limit of 35 feet in the RDS 15 and 35 feet in the RM 15. So today, someone could build a single-family home, maybe 3 stories high, or two stories with very high ceilings. The setbacks generally remain the same. There's a slight difference between the minimum lot size requirement. In RDS 15, it's 6,000 square feet for single family. In the proposed RM 15, it would be 5,000 square feet for detached single family, and duplexes, 7,500 for townhouses and multifamily. In preparation for tonight, we went through the questions that we received from the Planning and Zoning Board at the meeting in November, and I wanted to go through those questions and provide some information. The first question was, will the change in zoning increase the density in the area to be rezoned? Per the zoning district and per the future land use, the density remains the same. So the actual density potential remains the same. The actual existing density, once we counted up all the different types of dwelling units in the area, is approximately 9 dwelling units per acre. That table there gives you a breakdown of the different types of buildings in the area. There's not only single family, but there's duplexes, 1 triplex, and 7 fourplexes. Another question was, is RM15 zoning compatible with other RDS 15 zoning properties to the east? It's consistent with the medium, residential medium future land use category, up to 15 dwelling units per acre. The intent of the district is to provide areas for single-family residences and a variety of low-rise multifamily residences, ensure compatibility, and limited to locations in proximity to an arterial or collector like Powerline Road, or near community facilities like Marshall Thurgood Elementary School. And I looked around the map to see where does RM15 exist in other places. And I did find that it was adjacent to RC15 and RD15. And as I was kind of going around the map, we were also talking about how in Victoria Park, there's an eclectic mix of single-family residential uses. And the photos on the bottom are from that area to show how these different uses like townhouses fit in with the area with single family. For example, the one on the bottom left, to the left, it's hard to see it, but there's a single family home behind those lovely trees. And on the right, there's townhouses. Then the one in the middle, you can see a traditional single family home next to a townhouse. And then all the way to the right, you probably have a very much older single family home next to some newer townhouses. And that area in particular, that's they're generally in the RC15 zoning district, just as a note. So continuing on that conversation about compatibility, in 2017, the Urban Design and Planning Division initiated a number of revisions to the code that were called Neighborhood Design Criteria Revisions, or NDCR for short. And this was in response to a feeling that in a lot of the single-family neighborhoods, we were getting McMansionization, amongst the different homes, and that certain buildings, new buildings, were out of scale with the existing single-family character. Now, at the end of the day, no consensus was reached on design standards for single-family detached dwellings, but there was consensus for duplexes, townhouses, and cluster residential development. And I'll go into more detail about that. So part of this was also looking at fencing or walls. One of the questions last time was, would this new zoning district result with townhouses with walls facing single-family development? And there are some examples around the city of townhouses with walls in front of them, but they were built before 2017. Currently, the requirement for walls or fencing in front of townhouses, cluster, and duplex development, 75% of all walls must be non-opaque, such as vertical bars or picket fence. And then opaque hedges or walls must not exceed 2.5 feet, so that's pretty short. And then on the bottom here, I've got 3 examples. The one on the left here is a combination of wall and vertical bars. The one in the middle has no fencing at all, but the driveway's in the front. And the one all the way to the right, you can see that the fence and the wall here is a combination of a low wall with vertical bars. Then what about the possibility of cluster development coming into the area? What's the impact of that? Well, with the neighborhood design criteria, the NDCR, if you build cluster or zero lot line, if your building goes over 22 feet, then you have to start stepping back your building. So that way it lessens the impact on the neighboring buildings. So they're less likely to see your rooftop from all parts of their neighboring yard. And of course, they have to meet density requirements. With cluster development, 25% of the facade must be in glass, not a blank wall. We actually don't have that requirement for single family. There might be something in the building code, but in general, there is no specific requirement for single family. If you have a shared driveway, your garage can't face the street. And there's other specific requirements for roof landings and landscaping. Another question is, will the RM15 zoning district result in less trees and landscaping? Good question. This is something we're all very fond of in the city of Fort Lauderdale. The RDS, the existing zoning district, there are no minimum landscape requirements. So you could build out your lot to the fullest extent, and then what remains might be landscaping. Single family, they're required to have a total of 4 trees. With the RM15 zoning district, you have to have a minimum of 35% landscaping. Excuse me. It requires a roof landing in most cases of development. And then for multifamily townhouse and cluster development, you have to have 1 tree per 1,000 square feet of frontage. 20% of those trees must be shade trees like live oaks and other canopy trees. And then you must have a minimum of 12 ornamental shrubs for each 1,000 square feet in addition to vehicular use requirements. Those are the landscaping requirements for driveways. So other neighborhood design criteria, townhouse development, the ULDR requires that there's some different offset in the townhouses, like it's not a straight row, that one might be put a little bit forward and then the next unit put a little bit backward and forward and backward. So that way it's not just one long building. So there's some change in massing. Townhouse development, excuse me, on the same subject, they're required to have a variation in height as well, and garages spread out evenly, so it's not just one wall of garages. Cluster development, they have to have architectural features on all sides, and their garage has to be on the side or in the rear. So the original proposal is to rezone as proposed, which would be from RDS 15 to RM 15. We wanted to provide an alternate just as a just in case and for consideration if there's continuing concerns about the rezoning. Another possibility is keeping the 3 blocks from 9th to 8th Avenue, 9th Avenue power line to 8th Avenue, rezoning that to RM 15, and then the section to the east, you could go to RD 15 or RC 15. Actually, we think RC 15 provides a few more options. I think the only thing that's not allowed in the RC 15 still allows you townhouses, but multifamily isn't permitted. So that's an idea. And I had a table, we can go into more detail on the uses.
And Lorraine, if I can interrupt for a
Yeah.
second, the list of uses was actually handed out to the board members, so if you follow along, I think we might have just misquoted a couple of the uses, but we have a table in front of you that has RD 15, RC 15, and RM 15 for comparison purposes.
Just some background on the whole effort by the Central City CRA. They began workshops in 2018, and that some of that work stopped around 2019, and they decided to take a slightly different direction. Excuse me. And then they picked it up again in 2021 with a new consultant. And they're not only, I think one of the first effort in phase 1 is this rezoning of the northwest quadrant. The next phase would be to create a mixed-use zoning district for the areas north of Sunrise and along the FEC and eastern portion of Northeast 13th Street. A third phase would be to introduce a land use plan amendment to fully allow the envisioned uses and densities through the effort and all the community workshops. Just a reminder on the different notifications we've sent out. And here's the meetings that have been specific to this effort, which include the Central City CRA board meetings in August and October, meeting with the Middle River Terrace Association, a formal public participation meeting on this specific item, like all applicants have to do when they come to the Planning and Zoning Board. The first meeting was November 16th with the Planning and Zoning Board. And then based upon the recommendation tonight, if it's recommended to move to City Commission, we expect that we'll go for first reading on March 21st. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. And just to remind the board, in November when this came to the board, I had recommended the more restrictive rezoning with RM on the left 3 blocks and our D15 for the remainder of the blocks. And it sounded like, we didn't have a vote, of course, the board was moving in that direction. We gave the applicant a chance to go and reconvene and then come back. And it sounds, based on the alternative they've suggested here tonight, that might be something that's acceptable to them. So I just want to remind the board that. Now the question that I have is, of all the images that you showed tonight, were any of those multifamily projects or were those all townhomes?
I don't believe they were multifamily projects. I think they were all townhouse and cluster projects.
Thank you.
Okay. I was going to bring it back to the board and have a conversation after we've gotten the public input, if you don't mind. I see some more people have joined. In case you were not here when we started, if you're here to speak on this item or the next item, you need to be sworn in. So if you're here to speak and you weren't sworn in, if you would please stand and take the oath.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give tonight is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, you may be seated. Thank you.
Ladies, did you fill out a card to speak tonight? Did all of you? Okay, because I've got several cards here, so I'll be calling you. I'll ask for somebody to speak and then a backup, and we'll keep going through that. I'm going to allow 2 minutes per person to speak on this. So we're going to get started. We're going to start with Mary Ann Martone, if you'll come to the dais, and then after that will be Terry Carter, followed by Adam Feldman. So Mary Ann Martone, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Mary Ann Martone, are you here? Would you like to speak, ma'am? Please come up here to the front and. And again, if Terry Carter would follow her up, followed by Adam Feldman. Come right up here to the front, ma'am. Thank you.
So if the vote's not, I'm at leave before the vote. I don't know yet. We'll see how this goes.
Come on right up here, ma'am, to the microphone. If you'll please state your name for the record and then.
Mary Ann Martone.
Okay. Go ahead, ma'am.
I live at 1137 Northwest 15 Court in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I'm a retirement and disabled person, and I have no other place to go, and I'm looking to stay in my property. I've been here 27 years, and I'm a single person and no family, and my home is where I am, and I would like to be there. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Terry Carter? Is Terry here? Come on up, sir.
He doesn't want.
Okay, you just want to put it on record that you're opposed to it? Thank you. Let the record reflect that Terry Carter's opposed to it. Adam Feldman? Don't need to speak? Okay. Followed by Melina John and then Marie McGinley, sorry. So Melina, please come forward. I'm sorry? Okay, fine, understood. Are you Miss McGinley?
My name is Marie McGinley, and I live in South Middle River in the neighborhood that this represents, and I support this project fully. We've been working on it for a long time, and we'd be happy to have it done. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, next up is Nuasana Sutherland, followed by Edward Catland. Is Nuasana here? There we go. How about if I call you Miss Sutherland? Or is it Mrs. Sutherland? You got it. Miss Sutherland, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to say God sees and knows all things. It's Niwasian Sutherland. I live at 1610 Northwest 11 Terrace.
Okay.
So again, we found out this zoning is illegal. This is so disrespectful and disturbing when this lady got up here and she spoke like nobody lived there. We pay our mortgage, we pay our taxes, we pay our properties. And this is the neighborhood that we know, we live, we buy our things, our children go to school. It's very sad to continue to see that our elected official continue to ignore the concern and the protection of our communities, which our taxes pays for salaries. And you guys are elected by the people, not the developers. This zoning we know that this zoning is not being done by you guys. We feel that there's always abuse of position, standard of conduct, integrities, and ethics. The first meeting when we saw the HOA, they were accompanied by the developer. These members totally violate the protection of the community and the service they do for the community. But they don't make the final decision for homeowners. They talked about peacocks. We're talking about real life people. We're not animal activists, but we are homeowners. How did the community were contacted? How we weren't informed? And this has been going on for about 2 years. That's what you guys said. We don't know anything about it. The people, we would like to know how the people who don't speak English, they weren't informed, and they still don't understand what is going on. When we are called by investors, we tell them how we're going to sell our homes because we don't have nowhere to go. So I feel that you guys are allowing the developers to push us out. We are trying to figure out what law supports this, what city law, what states, what federal, or the Fair Housing Act. We want to know what law supports a developer that do not own property there to come in and decide on a decision for us. People are retired, they live on budgets, and there's nowhere to go. So we know that it's going to be increased homelessness. All this means is that our rights are given away, and you guys are making room for someone else. And I totally oppose it, and I know that I need to leave something for my children. So we don't know what's going on, but we're going to fight for our home.
Thank you, Ms. Sutherland. Edward Catalano, followed by, I believe it's Joan Woods. Is there an Edward Catalano here?
So, Chair, my name is CJ. I'm from the CRM, also the liaison for the Central City Redevelopment Advisory Board. Edward Catalano is a member, and so he has written comments that I have printed out in front of you. It's the one with images.
Okay.
Another
so-
member is Dennis Ulmer, so they won't be making comments, but our chair is here that can speak in support of the project. So far, the whole board is unanimously in support of the proposal as presented.
All right, so you'll submit that for the record. Ms. Woods? Come on up. Followed by A. Marie Scott. Good evening, ma'am. Please state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joan Woody. I lived there over 32 years. I worked at Broward General for 26 years. Worked very hard to raise my children, and now I'm helping raising my grandchildren. I'm opposed, and I think what they're doing is very wrong. They speak about us like if we're not there, and this is wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. A. Marie Scott. Followed by, I think it's Rochelle McShan or Raquel McShan. And then Ray Thrower. Good evening, Ms. Scott. If you would please state your name for the record.
This is Nana Scott. I'm sorry. My name is Amarie. I am a neighbor of Miss Sutherland's. All right. I've lived in this community for going on 6 years. I've watched, I've seen, I've heard, and I'm very disturbed by what I'm seeing right now. These people who do not speak English whatsoever. They may speak bits and pieces of English, but they don't read it. And all those signs were placed strategically on those specific streets where the majority are Haitian residents. They don't read English. They may speak a little English, but not enough to read a sign. You understand? And I have a question. How many of you all live right around those areas where they're going to rezone? Our families need a place to live. If we don't have a place to live, then what do you want us to do? There have been places called affordable housing. Let me tell you, not even people that they put on the Section 8 program can afford the affordable housing at all. They're too expensive. Everything is too expensive. On 16th, they built a boxed house out of like 3 or 4 of the boxes. That house went on sale for $530,000 in the middle of $180,000 homes, $240,000 to $50,000 homes. And now, all of a sudden, we have a crisis. Nobody has anywhere to go at $400,000, and our elderly people cannot afford it. So the government is going to come in and snatch their houses once it's increased so much that they can't afford the taxes. It's not fair. And it's disrespectful on every level. Please think about your grandparents. Think about your children. Think about your moms, your dads. Think about everyone when you do this. Do not do this. We don't want it. We love Fort Lauderdale. Trust me. We are a household of disabled people, literally. I don't even live by myself. I'm sick. But we can't afford this. But we love it here. If anything, take the taxes from the federal government and help us help ourselves. We'll keep the neighborhoods up. These neighborhoods have never, ever looked better than what they look right now. They've never been cleaned as much as they've been cleaned right now. I appreciate you listening, but please take it into a portion of respect for everybody, not just pocket money. Our children deserve to have somewhere to live. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Good evening, sir. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Ray Thrower. I'm the chair of the Central City CRA. I was here in November, and I appreciate all the feedback that the board members gave, and I appreciate the feedback that sometimes that they wanted to see everything, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, at a special meeting. We have actually, I personally have been involved with this since 2012. I've been a resident of the community since 2007. We do think phase 1, the way that this is proposed right now, is the right direction. And the Central City CRA Board has reviewed this numerous times, but here are meetings from August 3rd, August 24th, and October 10th, where all members of the Central City CRA unanimously approved this as presented with no changes. This community, I've lived there since 2007. We've had 2 boom cycles since that time. The community's improved. The young lady's right. It has improved. I remember one of the proudest things that I did in this community that I was able to work on was with Commissioner Charlotte Rostrom when we got a community development block grant to put the sidewalks and the street lighting on Northwest 8th Avenue, which, believe it or not, was controversial. At that time, we had neighborhood association meetings with over 70 people, and it had to be deferred because we couldn't get a majority people that would approve putting sidewalks and pedestrian lighting on Northwest 8th, which has been a great thing. You see people there walking and you see the lighting, and it's really helped. We do think that by doing phase one as presented is the right proposal for this community. Some people don't think it's enough, and obviously there's people here that think doing anything is wrong, but I do think this is the right step forward, and I appreciate your time. Thank you. Ray Thrower.
Thank you, Mr. Thrower. I believe it's Raquel McShann. Is that you, ma'am? Okay, great. Good evening. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Raquel McShann. I have a vacant lot, sir, that I need to develop, and with the current zoning, I'm not able to fully maximize the usage of my property. And especially in Fort Lauderdale, where there's a dire need for affordable housing, I would really appreciate if I'm able to maximize the use of my property.
Is that it? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Okay, that concludes all the cards I've got for people that want to make public comment. Is there anybody else in the public that would like to come forward and be heard on this item? Hearing and seeing none, we will close the public hearing of this and bring it back to the board. Mary, I know you had a question, so I'm going to let you go first.
Can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, my first question is for Lorraine, and I'd like to know, one of our concerns when we were here in November, we had members of the community come and talk about the fact that they didn't really have a community meeting that they'd been to. I've read your notes of what you've done. I'm looking at the schedule here. I don't see any community meetings between the time we met in November and now. Just wondering, listening to the community members speak, what has been done to specifically communicate with the people who live in the 41 acres that you want to rezone?
Yeah.
Since November, because
Yeah.
that was a concern they had in November.
No, it's straightforward. Yeah, we had one meeting last night with a few folks. We haven't had a meeting open for, everybody didn't schedule one, honestly, between the last Planning and Zoning Board meeting and tonight. We did make sure the signs were out with tonight's meeting date, so that way people could have some awareness of tonight's meeting.
Lorraine, can you also mention the letters that were provided prior to the meeting? And maybe CJ can speak to some of the outreach in addition to what we just didn't cover. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sija, and I can also help answer that question. I want to remind everyone that this schedule, or this portion of the project, once we halted in 2019, we had already worked on numerous engagement meetings with the community, workshops to kind of get all those ideas into a draft. So everything else after that, we understood that we had limited funding for the project. So we had always told the community that from now on, this is our project, and we're gonna work on the code and all the details to put it together, package it, bring it back to the advisory board, and we'll schedule those meetings in the evening so everybody can attend. And I would personally ask for people's emails, so anytime I have a rezoning project update or where the consultant comes out and talks about details, I would send out that mass email. That's how we communicated to the public about these meetings. And so the proposal never entirely changed. It was the same one from 2018 all the way to 2020. Starting August, that's when we had the RM 15 proposal, because we discussed it with staff, and based on all the comments we got, we felt like this was the best option that provides a lot of housing, residential housing types for the community that people wanted, and we presented it this way. So we didn't go back out because we're not trying to restart the process again. And as I explained before, after a while, you get people engaged really strongly, and then they fall away, they come back, they forget where it was. And so some people will think we've changed it, but we haven't. It's just evolved, and this is where we're at.
So when you had these meetings, sent these emails, mailed letters, whatever you did you do it in multiple languages?
No, we don't, but I mean, that was a comment that was made at the last time. So this northwest quadrant portion, we're here now, but we have that second phase that we're gonna work extra hard to do that, because I wasn't aware of the different languages that we should be doing outreach for.
So, I have a strong concern. I understand advisory boards, I understand, and we're an advisory board, and I think it's really important to have these boards. But I also think it's equally important to talk to the people that actually live within the area that's going to be changed, because you're changing it for them. Most of the people that come before us and ask for a change are homeowners or developers who want that change. In this case, several people commented on the fact that they feel like this is being done to them as opposed to for them. And can you comment on that?
No, of course. So as I said, for the first 2 years of the project, we did intense community outreach, and that involved us the CRA sending out mailers to each of the property addresses in the area, every single home in the area. So whether you own and you live in a different state, you would get the same notice. This is an area that is owned, about 68% rent their homes, and then 30% own. So, with that kind of numbers, I don't necessarily know who's going to be engaged and who's not. But I do recognize faces that have been here since 2018. And I will say for the second project, we'll do extra of everything. I mean, I'm in conversations with the neighborhood association presidents. I'm trying to forecast what meetings they have in the near future, because as soon as we're done with staff vetting the documents, we can go out and present at their meetings and still have the regular advisory board, special meetings or regular meetings, however meetings we need or we can accommodate to make sure that everybody knows what that proposal looks like.
At that point, you've already done phase one and rezoned the 41 acres that many, many people are living in. And I appreciate you doing it going forward. It had been my hope in November that you were going to do that for this phase so that we would really have an opportunity to hear, some buy-in from the people, from the residents who live in the area. Let me ask you a question about the members of the Central City CRA that we got letters from. Do they both live in this neighborhood, since we got letters of support from them?
Come in.
You gave us 2 letters.
Right, only 2 members provided written comments. There's also at least 6 copies of minutes that I've provided. In these meetings, they've voted unanimously for the proposal.
My question is, how many of the people on that advisory board or who wrote these letters live in the 41 acres? And I'm assuming Mr. Thrower does, because, yes. So he's one, so I'm just wondering how many others. We have 2 copies here of a letter.
So Edward Catalano lives in the area, but not in this specific northwest quadrant. The second, which is my vice chair, Dennis Ulmer, doesn't live within the area, but he lives at least 300 feet from the area. The area, I mean the CRA.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. First, I'd like to start off by making some clarifications for everyone in the audience. And if maybe, Lorraine, you can confirm whether or not this first statement is correct. We are not making a decision tonight. We're making a recommendation to the commission who is making a decision, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so everybody understands we're not making any decisions tonight. We're making a recommendation to the commission. So if you go to the commission meeting, those are the folks who are going to make the final decision on this matter. Next, just by way of background for the board and for everybody in the audience, the zoning, which is now currently RDS 15, was originally RD 15. So it had allowed for 15 units per acre and a higher density of housing to be built in this area, which is why many of you here today probably live there, because at one point in the past it allowed for there to be more density in this area, for there to be more housing in this specific area. In the 90s, many of the neighborhood residents came out and fought the RD15 zoning, and they created this new zoning, S, meaning single family, which now would only allow single family homes to be built in this neighborhood. So the zoning as it is now is actually going to prevent there from being more housing opportunities in the area. So what the group that's out here tonight came to do is to try to open it back up to how it was originally, when a lot of the housing that you live in was built and allowed to be built, so that there could be more housing for people to live in. And now, that being said, those of you who live there, I am extremely sensitive to preserving the sanctity of our neighborhoods in Fort Lauderdale. These are what make our neighborhood so special, our city. The fact that we have these neighborhoods, these areas that we call home, surrounding the downtown core, so close to everything. So I outright oppose the proposal as it's been put forth to us here today as it stands. I agree with you all. I don't think that is good for the development of this neighborhood. I do, however, think that the first 3 blocks along the major thoroughfare on the left-hand side, is that Andrews?
Ninth Avenue.
Powerline Road,
Power line.
Northwest 9th Powerline
That
Road.
those would be appropriately zoned as RC 15, and that the remainder of the neighborhood would just be RD 15. So no multifamily, nothing that's going to turn this neighborhood into something other than it already is. Something that's going to keep the neighborhood, preserve its character, its integrity. So I'm going to go ahead and move that we recommend to the commission that.
Can I ask you to hold off on making any motions until we hear from everybody?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Do you have any more before we move on? Sorry about that, Jay, but I didn't want you to.
No, that's all.
Does anybody else wish to speak to this? Mr. Bronco?
Sure. I think what we're finding here is just, a break in communication between the CRA and the neighborhood. And it happens so much. As an architect, I come up here and present before boards like this same one. And I always hope there's somebody in favor of my project when I come here. And never happens. Usually it's everybody opposed. And, the staff and the CRA, they don't have land use attorneys and architects going out there and meeting with folks and trying to get the people who support the project in here too. I think there may be a lack of that. I totally agree with Jay. When we had seen this thing originally, I think you should restore people's rights back to where it was before this RDS zoning was created. And I like the idea of creating more density along power line, because that only helps preserve the neighborhood more by creating a little more density along that edge. So I think it makes sense. I just think that the city moving forward and the CRA has to do a better job getting people involved and having them come here. One question I do have for you all: what happened before 2018, before this community workshop? Who was the person who said this needed to be done? I've got the timeline here.
Oh, before 2018.
So who was the person in 2018? Or who was the committee or neighborhood association?
So-
What caused us to start this whole process?
Of course. My recollection is that, so the Northwest CRA is older, and at some point, they had tried to expand the area north to include this area, but the county wouldn't allow it. So in a nutshell, we had enough necessity of finding of slum and blight in this area to request the county to approve it as a central city area.
So it wasn't the neighborhood associations coming to you guys saying, hey, please do something about this. This is horrible over here. We need to fix it. It was just the CRA looking in and saying, hey, this will be a good area
No,
for us to expand.
not the CRA. In our redevelopment plan, it talks about numerous community meetings that were held, and that's how they etched out the area. And then through those meetings, also a draft, like a proposal, like what they want to see along the corridors and the northwest quadrant. So we didn't just come up with this plan. It was already a planned project to undertake once the CRA was approved, and it's in our redevelopment plan. So once the central city became a CRA area, there wasn't any funding. So I believe between 2012 to 2015, they talked about it, the advisory board at the time, the city commission. They agreed on us rezoning this entire area based on that redevelopment plan. And until we had the funding, we put out for an RFP, hired somebody that started in 2018. So really, it's the only project that we've undertaken since being born in 2012.
Right. What you're describing to me doesn't sound like a grassroots effort, like, Fred and Ginger living over there said, we got to do something about this and start this whole process.
If we
It almost feels like we were working in a bubble a little bit as a CRA.
I believe if we look through minutes with the city commission and they hear the advisory board, and the advisory board represent the people that live there, because our board is made up of residents and everyone that's a stakeholder within the area. When you read those minutes, you can see how passionate people continue to be.
Right.
Even at that time, which I even went through those, and I saw Ray's name, he commented, I was like, oh, look, so, I mean, I wasn't here at that time to speak to that, but there's certainly more, someone from our staff, but, for example, Alberto used to be the CRA director at the time, so he's very familiar with the issues of this area and the type of projects they wanted to undertake.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No, ma'am, I'm sorry, the public meeting's been closed, sorry.
And
Sure.
that CRA manager, Clarence Woods, he would like to add a few things too.
We're not, there's no question posed.
But we've already closed the public meeting. He was here when I asked if anybody else wanted to speak.
No,
Or is he-
he's staff. He's the CRA manager.
I'm sorry.
Just to speak to process and not necessarily what actually occurred, but as Ceja mentioned, when the city tried to get the CRA for the central city, it actually was created with the city's TIF only. The county did not include its TIF, so it's a city CRA only. But in the process of creating the redevelopment trust fund, there is a requirement that there is like she mentioned, the finding of necessity and a redevelopment plan. The redevelopment plan is produced, or we come up with it by having community meetings. That redevelopment plan basically is the guide or the blueprint for eliminating the slum and blight conditions that were found in the finding of necessity that authorized or provided for, there being a CRA. So you go to the community and you come up with projects in the redevelopment plan. So basically, it did come from the community. This particular project, as well as everything else that's in the redevelopment plan, which is the guide for eliminating the slum and blight conditions which authorize the creation of a CRA. So more so just about processing the fact that there was much outreach in putting together the redevelopment plan and coming up with projects like this.
Thank you.
Sherry?
And I have done a lot of work in the CRA, and the incentives for the neighborhoods in these projects are incredible, what they do. Because you have to invest in the neighborhood, you have to hire folks from the neighborhood. There are dollars available if you improve your home or improve your business in the CRA. I think they do an amazing job. My whole point was, I think there could be better communication, because when you start talking TIF and CRA and, people are like, what's that mean? And redevelopment, a lot of these folks think, hey, we're out of here. They see gentrification as a bad thing. A lot of this investment is in their properties. It's allowing them to live in a much nicer neighborhood, and they think they're getting booted out and a bunch of new people are going to come in. So I think it's more of a communication thing on your part and the city's part to explain it to them. Because I understand it, and I've seen it happen along the Sistrunk corridor, and I've done many projects over there for Chris Smith. We've got Smitty's Wings down there on Sistrunk. If you guys haven't been, it's awesome. You should check it out. But they've done a lot of good things along the corridor. And a lot of that has to do with the CRA reinvesting in the neighborhood. And nobody is moving out. They're just enjoying the space much more. So I'm telling you guys this. I'm not the guy to be telling you this. It's the CRA. That's just my personal experience. I would support something better than what is there now.
Correct.
But I'm with Jay, I think, on this one.
Okay.
You done?
Yes.
Sherry?
Thank you, Mike. It's still not clear to me the impetus of this, but I think what is clear is that it wasn't really organic, right? I don't believe that the community said, hey, I really like the way Victoria Park is scattered with townhouses and single-family houses. I personally don't think that's charming. I just don't, and it sounds to me like the residents in this area don't consider that charming as well. I think that Jay's idea of density on the edges makes much more sense. But at the same time, I agree with John's point about this is, I think, a large part of communication issue with, well, it may not have been organic, and there may not have been enough discussion. I don't think that it is really clear to the residents what is actually going to happen here. That if this were to come to fruition, it doesn't mean that they're about to be kicked out of their homes, and I don't think people understand that. I don't think it was well explained. I think that oftentimes government does a horrible job of explaining things. They know what they want to do, and they do it, and I think that's an example of it. So there's a lot of room for change here, I think, and a lot of room for communication, certainly in the future. But if anything, I would be inclined to go along with Jay's suggestion for a circumference of density and not the rezoning in the center of this section.
Thank you, Sherry. Does anybody else want to make a comment?
Listen, I'll make a very quick statement. When we say that people aren't going to get thrown out of their houses, they are. These are rental homes. So when an owner realizes, when a guy who's renting a house, what really should be happening is we should put more emphasis on the owners to improve their property for individuals that are living there. That's where we should be focusing. The issue becomes when you're renting a house in an area where the zoning changes, of course, the owner of the home, the value goes up, the rents are still staying the same because they might be limited on rents, and those individuals get thrown out of their houses, and then they build townhouses. And to this young lady's comment that she made that, the rising house prices and things of that nature, if you take that in a bubble of what she said, people are like, wait a minute, this has nothing to do with it. But it really does, because what happens is those homes are now replaced with townhomes. Those townhomes are not going to be $1,000 a month. Those townhomes are going to be $3,000, $4,000 a month. So that, I understand where they're coming from. If anything, I would pull this back to where Jay is. I think Jay has a better idea of, on power line itself, because the density can be improved on power line itself. And instead of back out parking and things like that, that are probably a danger as well, that's probably the best idea. But this plan as it stands now, I don't think that it's a good plan.
Thank you. Mary?
Yeah, I agree with so much of what's been said here tonight, and I thought there was pretty much a strong feeling of consensus last time when Jay brought up what he brought up, but I thought we're also asking that they do the neighborhood the courtesy of talking to the actual people who live in the neighborhood. And if I were sitting in this audience tonight and hearing my neighborhood described this way, and all of this conversation, I would think, why didn't somebody have a meeting? I mean, they have Thurgood Marshall Elementary right there. It's not like there's churches in the area. There are places to have meetings. So I think we all kind of are ending up in the same place. But I would ask us tonight to do this neighborhood the courtesy of actually talking to the people who live there, some of whom are property owners, some of whom are renters, and explain everything that's been being talked about up here, but not to them. And I just think that's a really bad, I heard several of them say how they love Fort Lauderdale. I think you love your city more when your city really includes you in the conversation. And so tentatively, Jay, and that's where I was last time, and then I thought they were going to go out and actually try to convene a meeting and talk to some of these people. And I would hope that's what we end up doing tonight, is asking them to have that conversation before we move ahead to the commission, and then they go there, and they've also been left out one more time.
Do you have a motion, Mary?
No.
Well,
I think there's going to be a fight over who gets to make a motion, but there's still people that want to talk, so. Does anybody else have any comment on this item? Patrick?
Yeah, I also agree with almost everything that was said up here, and I very much agree with Mary. I'm super disappointed that they did not listen to our request to meet with the residents of that neighborhood. That's specifically what we asked, and they didn't do it. Okay, and now they came up here and they're ready for us to just vote on it as it was again. And these people feel like what they're charged with doing is a negative to them when they should be seeing it as a positive, but they don't, because you haven't done proper outreach, and it should be an embarrassment to them. So other than that, I agree with what we've said.
Anyone else?
I just got a quick question, Mike. When notices are sent out, are the notices sent out to the homeowners, or the notices sent out to tenants that might be renting those homes or renting in a duplex?
The notices are sent to the property owners.
Okay, so, and did I hear somewhere along the line, did I hear the percentage of renters in the neighborhood as opposed to owners? Did I hear that from some, or am I just imagining that?
Yes, I said 68% to like 30.
68% are renters?
Right.
Okay, so back to Brad's point before, that, the renters aren't being notified, and if it's 68%, that's a good possibility. There's a large percentage of people that could get potentially bumped out once the neighborhood starts getting redeveloped and the pricing starts going up. And I think that's kind of the concerns that we've heard, and we've heard echoed here. And if there's a good reason why there's less people in the room that would be making a point, especially if the renters don't know what's going on and only the homeowners do. And it's to the great benefit of the homeowner. If this zoning gets, this all gets changed, property values go up. But from the renter is likely to get bumped out.
Anyone else? So quickly, for the people on the side, by show of hands, how many of you own your property? Okay, so I will keep my comments brief as well, because I agree with kind of everything's going on here. What concerns me is the tone, and I could hear the fear of the people speaking tonight, of your taxes going up. So let me tell you, if you own your property and you own it as a homestead, the most it'll ever go up is 3% because of our Save Our Homes. So don't feel that this is going to change. I'm not justifying it, but I'm just saying, take pause with that concern. Nobody's going to run you out of your house. The only other thing I got to say is I sense, again, I heard it here, that there's a disconnect to the linguistics that go on that we deal with every month. And they hear only occasionally or maybe for the first time. So as we sit up here and we want to make a motion, I'm concerned that they're not going to understand our motion. I'm not so sure that you don't have a great motion to make, but I'm even more sure that they need to go back out and explain what is being contemplated. They need to get warm and fuzzy on it. They are residents, they pay taxes, and they do pay these people's salaries. So they should understand exactly what's happening underneath their feet. That's my comments. Mary, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I think I'd like to make a motion to defer this item. Is 1 month long enough, or do we need 2 months to hold a community meeting to notify the residents and the owners of the properties, to provide that notification in at least 3 languages, Haitian, Spanish, and English, and to hold at least 1 community meeting for this community? Though personally, I think a couple would be good, because I think the same workshops that everybody else got the benefit of should be done with the people who live there.
So before you conclude that motion, Jay, are you willing to back away from your original motion, or you started to make a motion and I shut you down?
I think that, I think that we, in our capacity as planning and zoning board members, understand this issue very well. We're sensitive to the concerns of the neighborhood and preserving it, and I know that exactly how I'm going to vote on this. And I think it's almost a disservice to the community for us to just create suspense around the same vote, which is really beneficial for them. So I think that there should be communication regardless. If we vote any way tonight, there's also an opportunity between now and the commission meeting where the actual decisions are made for there to be additional communication. And I just don't see any. If you vote for that, I will vote. My vote would be no.
And likewise, I would most likely support your motion, but I would like the courtesy of having the staff go out and explain to this community exactly what it means for them, and to have them receive the proper notification of a meeting for everybody within the boundaried area and 300 feet, and then come back here next month or the month after with the understanding that I think most of us are feeling like the power line, the dual option is a good option, but that give them the courtesy of hearing it and what it means. And I just think that's the fair thing to do and the right thing, Jay. I think your idea was sound last time. It's just sometimes, don't we owe it to the people who live there to involve them in this process? And that's what I'm asking for.
So would you support a motion that made a recommendation to the commission and that staff would
I would support that after they do the outreach, because they haven't done the outreach.
Anything going to the commission right now would be a little bit premature in my mind.
I mean, we've done that before, and then we get a half-hearted compliance, check the box effort, and that's not what we need here.
I think at this point, then somebody just has to make a motion.
Well, I'm making a motion to defer.
So is before any more motions are made, is there a sense of urgency to this item as far as the city's concerned? Because this has been going over for a while, and so to put it off for a month or 2 or 3 or however long, let these people get comfortable with what the message is. I sense they don't understand what's happening.
We've always gotten pressure to get this done quick, but with the discussion today, if you feel like a motion to do additional outreach, we can certainly do that. I only ask that you don't put a month limit, so it gives us time to advertise, to reach out, and also to do different language.
When you do these outreaches, the people that attend your meetings, are they 100% owners? Are they 80% owners? Are they 38% owners, as you intimate that that's what the ownership? What's the people? Do you get renters that come to these meetings?
So we've always reached out to property owners, so now I'm going to change the tactic and send it out to the addresses within that boundary.
That, well, my personal opinion is
Yeah.
that's not the right tactic because they don't have skin in the game. For me, that's almost even worse than these people that work every day to pay the taxes, and these people can just overnight get up and move. So I would not promote that, me personally.
Okay.
I think you need to speak to the people that pay the taxes, that have the direct impact.
And
They
that's
can't
why
just get up and walk.
that's why we notice the property owners directly.
That's fine. I just don't know if you have an open door policy that you allow anybody to come in.
Of course, all our meetings are public meetings.
That happens with signage, that happens with, to really get a community notified, I would notify the people who live there and the people who own the property. And then you're doing a broad community outreach, regardless of what the response is, you are doing a broad community outreach. And everybody who's going to be impacted one way or the other has the opportunity to hear what this is about,
But Mary.
other than word of mouth.
But Mary, as Brad said, if we have 70% renters in the area, all of those folks are going to be opposed because it means that eventually their rents will go up. It will. So you'll have 70% opposition, 30% for. What will you do with the 70%? You're going to say, well, there's more opposed, but they're renters. And as Mike says, I'm afraid renters, I feel for them, but they are and can be sort of transient.
And don't
I must say.
underestimate the fact that there are probably property owners that are out there that support this. We heard a lot of people that didn't, but there are probably people out there.
Sure.
My suggestion at this time to move things along, because I think I sense where this is all going, is if you think you can bring home a motion that incorporates some of what Jay's putting with a time factor so that they can go back out and do some outreach with the community so that they better understand.
I got it.
I think that's where it needs to go.
I've got it, but I just want to say one thing before I make it. Can I say
I have a
one thing?
question too.
We can't stop people from seeing public notice and having the right to go to a meeting and hear what's going to happen. So given that, and given that the best way to have the conversation is to have them come and hear, I think we let as many people as possible know so that the conversation is presented to everybody the same and we get the message through. My recommendation and what I had kind of thought we were leaving here to do is that we defer this with specific instructions to do broad notification, which to me means residents and homeowners, in 3 languages at least, Spanish, English, and Haitian, with the understanding that they are going to explain the dual RD to RM15, RDS to RD15 map that we see up here, and what the benefits of that are, and if there's the pros and cons, what the benefits are, what the benefits, what could happen, and that be done. And if you need more than 1 month, then make it 2 months.
1 month's not enough. Jay, you
Just
had
a quick question for Mike. You asked a good question about the audience, about being renters. My question for the audience is, how many of you who live in this neighborhood live in your own single-family home? Okay, and how many of you live in multifamily or townhouse? Okay, thank you.
All right. If there's no more discussion, do you want to make an attempt at this, Mary?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I thought I did, but where did Brad go?
Brad had to leave.
Okay. I move that we defer item, whatever, for 2 months. 2 months?
I would ask that you don't put a time limit.
Okay. I would
I
move.
thought you did.
I thought we had.
asked for a
No, I was
specific
asking,
number.
just make it general, but we will come back.
We
If
need
you
we
don't
need a
vote on
date
it.
certain, CJ. So if we want, we can either do March 15th or April 19th. But because
more
everything
time.
was
Let's get this-
advertised, we need a date certain.
I would go 3 months.
April
I think you need
19th.
at least 2, if not 3.
Okay, April
Because they have,
19th.
CRA has to do their thing, then
You know what,
staff
that was
has
a
to
good point about
re-advertise.
notification. So I'm saying April 19th, is that good, John?
April?
Yeah. To the April Planning and Zoning meeting and that during that time, staff notify the impacted neighborhoods. That would be the 41 acres plus anyone within 300 feet of the proposed change as shown on here, RDS 15 to RM 15 from Northwest 9th Avenue to Northwest 8th Avenue, and RDS 15 to RD 15 from Northwest 8th Avenue to Northwest 7th Avenue to the impacted neighborhoods.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second. Do we have any more discussion before we put
A little
this
bit,
to
I'm sorry to
vote?
belabor this, but,
I'm sorry, Sherry?
sorry to belabor it, but I've got a couple of questions.
My apologies, who seconded? Chair, if I could I just ask a quick question? Because I know everybody will break up after the vote is done. If you haven't provided your information, please make sure you sign in. And if you have other neighbors that are interested in, joining us, just, maybe just contact us, contact CJA. Just make sure you sign in and give us your either email or phone, just so we have a good connection with at least the folks that were here. And then maybe you can pass on to your neighbors as well. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Sherry, you were going to say something?
Yeah, thanks. I'm on board with, there's a lot in that motion.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that I'm on board with all of it. And then just a question for us to ponder as we're heading down this path of notifying everyone. And I was supportive of having people understand what is happening. But I think there's a difference between creating a scenario where percentages rule when we're talking about property rights. I think there's a balance here, and I'm concerned that we're setting ourselves up to say we've got some kind of majority rule because we put it out to everybody in the neighborhood. And I think that needs to be understood that that's not the criteria. And I just don't want that to be the implication.
So I think that's an astute observation, and I agree with you, and that's kind of why I said there may be some people that live in that area, that own property in that area, that are for it. My concern is that I heard a lot of people who didn't understand, and that's what I'm trying to cure. And we can revisit it in 3 months, maybe 3 years, 3 months in April with that. But I agree with 100% with what you're saying. So, any other comments before we call the vote?
So I think the way I phrased this, it led to advertising as broadly as possible without specifying what that means. And because I know we also do publications and we have signs, so I was trying to.
Okay, Leslie, call the vote, please.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Scheckman,
No.
Mr. Baranco,
Yes.
Ms. Spurtick,
Yes.
Mr. McTeague,
Yes.
Ms. McCartney,
Yes.
Mr. Gannon,
Yes?
Mr. Rotello,
Yes.
Chair Weymouth.
Yes. Motion passes 7-1. Thank you. We'll see you in April, I'm sure. Good night, folks. Be vocal. You're doing the right thing. Okay, moving on to case number 3, case UDP T 22011.
Can I ask you, sir, to please, I'm sorry.
Let's give them just a minute, Mr. Schnell, to clear the. Folks, if we can ask you to step into the lobby to continue your conversation, we still have more meeting to go.
But they didn't go out to anyone in these meetings.
All right, Mr. Schnell, when you're ready.
Of course.
We are as well.
All right. Good evening. My name is Adam Schnell. I'm a planner for the Urban Design and Planning Division, and tonight I'm going to be providing you a brief presentation on affordable housing text amendments. As everyone's probably aware, in September of last year, the city adopted a citywide affordable housing regulation. Subsequently, in December of last year, the county amended policy 2.16.4, otherwise known as the Geller Amendment, which provides residential units in exchange for setting aside a portion of units as affordable within our regional activity centers, as well as lands with a future land use of commerce, as long as they front state roads and county arterials. Therefore, because the county amended their policies, we have to make changes to our ULDR. The First Amendment is to the downtown rack, and this is more for clarification purposes to let developers know that if they construct affordable housing units within the downtown rack zoning district, that they have access to Geller units as long as they provide affordable housing units per the affordable requirements of the ULDR requirements. The second modification is to the mixed-use development regulations, which requires at least 50% of first-floor frontages to include office space or commercial uses, as well as prohibits first-floor residential units along state roads and county arterial frontages, but would permit residential units on secondary streets. Now, although this is a county measure, the city does support these amendments specifically because as we introduce residential units to our commercial corridors, we have to ensure that our commercial corridors stay commercial in nature by supporting the inclusion of commercial uses such as office spaces, retail uses, and restaurants in order to help support the nearby residential communities. The next modification provides language that specifies that single-use residential buildings are permitted within mixed-use development sites as long as they're not along state roads and county arterials. Our current regulations do stipulate that single-use residential buildings are permitted on mixed-use sites, but we've been told a lot by the development community that the current language is not clear enough. So we've modified this language just to be clearer and it's easier to use hopefully going forward so that there's no miscommunication. The last modification is to our affordable housing regulations. Specifically, affordable housing units cannot be more than 10% smaller than the same market rate unit type. That means if you have a 2-bedroom market rate unit that's 1,000 square feet, the 2-bedroom affordable housing unit cannot be smaller than 900 square feet. The second modification is the same as the mixed-use development regulations. 50% of first-floor frontages along state roads and county arterials must be office or commercial use in nature, and it prohibits first-floor residential units along state roads and county arterials frontages. The last modification is an update to the payment in lieu of, which creates a flat rate of $10,000 per unit within a development project. This is applied to both market rate units as well as affordable units. So it would apply to all units within a development. So if you have a 100 dwelling unit complex, then that $10,000 fee would be applied to all units. So there would be $1 million payment in lieu of fee. 50% of those monies goes into the county's Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and the remaining 50% goes into the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund to be utilized to construct additional affordable housing in the future. Now, we have provided outreach and correspondence to local attorneys, stakeholders, and neighborhood associations. We've received only a few phone calls and feedback, more for clarification purposes to better understand what the modifications do. But thus far, we haven't received any negative feedback. Any questions?
Jay?
How often does that $10,000 figure get reevaluated? If
On an annualized basis, it increases 3%.
Okay. And my other question is on the requirements for the interiors of the units. Do those need to be the same as the market rate units?
They have to be similar in nature. So if one's granite and the other one happens to be a different material, it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly the same. But most developers that we're actually talking to locally, they just want to build everything the same. It's cheaper because you have economies of scale when you're purchasing items.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's what I was thinking. Okay, thank you.
Mike?
Any other, yeah, sure.
A process question. So this is amending the city's regulations to comply with the counties. This has been put to us as an obligation that we have to, comply, and that our regulations must meet the counties? Is there some reason or some way that ours would deviate still?
It can only deviate in certain ways. There are specific things that we have to adopt in order to have access to the Geller units. Everything that I've went over tonight would have to be adopted in order to have access to...
Access to, I'm sorry?
Access to the residential units that are released from the county. So there are specific requirements that Senator Geller had worked on for a few years with municipalities within Broward County. And these are the modifications that the communities have come up with.
Yes, so the answer is yes, right. So the county dictates. Yeah.
Correct. That is correct.
Any other questions before we open up to the public? All right, at this time, we'll open up to the public. Is there anybody in the public that would like to be heard on this item? Ms. Chakas?
Good evening, Nectaria Chakas, with the firm Lockery and Chakas. I'm here to support this text amendment. I could tell you that this is coming to you after being workshopped by the county with the development community, the stakeholders. I think this is something that's been in the works and something that's been desired not only by municipalities and by the county, but I think developers have also tried and struggled with how to bring affordable housing into the city. And so this is actually something that's being implemented countywide. I think you're going to start to see more affordable housing because of it, whether that's in the form of developments that are actually incorporating affordable housing with the market rate, or paying the fee in lieu of, which is a large fee that the city will get 50% of when it's paid at building permits. So in either event, it's a win-win. You will see more affordable housing because of it, and I can tell you that we already have developers that are anxious to see this move forward so that they can move forward with their projects. So just here to speak in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Crush?
I have a question too for, I guess, either of them. That's fine. Yeah, I have a question for you. Sorry, Ms. Crush. If we were to run out of amendments, is this the new legislation that would allow for developments to continue just with this affordable housing element included?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thanks.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, board members. Courtney Crush again. I'm here to speak in support of this amendment because it makes the Geller amendment usable, specifically by Fort Lauderdale. With its current terms, given the percentage that needed to be commercial, that meant that development that was shorter in western Broward County might be able to achieve that balance and percentage, but any of the urban projects in our corridors, every time we had architects run the numbers, the commercial total, square footage was about 5%. So this does give Fort Lauderdale the ability to apply for units. As Mr. Schechtman stated or alluded to, both downtown units and flex units are almost gone. So I think given everything in the pipeline. So this actually is a win-win in the sense that it provides opportunities for our planned growth, but also does either provide a funding source, a real funding source, or residential. So again, here to speak in support.
I have another
Thank you, ma'am.
question, Chair. I have another question.
Hang on, Courtney. Jay has nowhere to be after this.
So,
Yeah.
I'm up all night. So let's say one of your clients were to get units, a project approved with the 10% affordable housing inclusion, and then all of a sudden, magically, more flex units were allocated to the city. What would the process be for your clients to just swap the units that they have for those flex units and not have to include affordable housing?
Well, I'm not going to speak for the city attorney's office. I imagine they may weigh in and indicate that if you were asking to be allocated units from a different flex pool, you would have to go through a process, site plan and flex allocation. But I, of course, will defer to the city attorney's office.
Adam, you seem to know.
Yeah, so we can't necessarily be allocated any more residential flex units. It's a differentiation between a map that was adopted between the county and the city in the 80s. So it was a differential in the units based upon the land use map and our local zoning. So there's not going to be any more flex units going forward after we've allocated them all.
There won't be any more flex units.
Once we allocate them all, there won't be any residential flex units left.
Does the city attorney agree with that?
Well, yeah, rack units are somewhat separate than residential flex units.
But if there are more rack units, I think that's going to be Jay's question.
Mr. Schnell is correct in his description of what flex units are, but I wouldn't go as far to predict whether or not any more would be created. But flex units are the difference between the city's land use plan map and the counties. And without a change that increases density in either of those maps to create additional flex units, under the current scenario, there wouldn't be any additional created.
Okay, so in order for more to be created, either the city's land use or the land use maps would have to be updated to allow for higher densities. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Just to kind of simplify it, the county allots a certain number of dwelling units to the city. And if we choose to distribute them in a different manner, or say if in a particular area we choose to designate a land use that has less density than what's on the same property on the county's map, we have these extra units that we haven't used, and they turn into flex units. And that's what we can use and allocate through our flex policy elsewhere in the city.
And that's what we've been using, and now
that is correct.
Now all future units will have to come through this, unless there's a change in what you just outlined. Got it. Cool.
Just have one question. I may have asked this last time. What was the rational analysis behind the $10,000?
That's essentially, originally there was a calculation that used the Florida Housing Finance Corporation's average cost of development for high-rise, mid-rise, and Garden S units, which came out to approximately $42,000 per unit. The development community came out and stated at those numbers and the cost of development that they could not afford a viable project, so therefore they wouldn't use the policy at $42,000. So through discussions with the county, the number they came out with that would be appropriate in order to meet both needs: one, constructing additional affordable housing, and two, meeting the needs of the developer, was $10,000.
So the county came up with $10,000.
Correct. That is a county measure.
Because I do a lot of work in this town, and I don't know how you build something for $10,000.
That's why the 10,000 fee is applied to all units within the development. But I concur. I would very much enjoy if the number was larger than 10,000. But unfortunately, in order to get the units, we asked, and we cannot actually increase that $10,000 number.
Okay.
I actually ran like an analysis on like the exit value of a property with the 10% actual affordable housing units combined versus just paying the fee outright. And I do think at the $10,000 number on all of the units that there is an incentive to include the affordable housing as part of the project, which is why I support this this whole thing.
You're saying it's more of a delta, that $10,000, between what it would cost
Well,
to
if it's a
build versus not build?
$300,000 unit project, 300-unit project, then it'd be $3 million fee. So then the developer looks at it and they say, okay, should I pay $3 million now, or just include, 30 units at, 80% or 100% of the area median income? And when you take, the rent that is designated for that by the housing authority and look at the difference between that and what the actual market rate is, and translate to how that would lead to your operating income, divided that by a cap rate to get to a value of that differential, it's probably at or below the actual penalty.
Gotcha.
So it does, I think, encourage
And
development.
that's what I wanted to hear, because I'm like, $10,000, where do you come up with that? That's interesting the way you say that. So it's basically the money you're going to give up if you don't build it. So I got you. All right.
Is there anybody else from the public that would like to be heard on this item? Sir, as you're coming up, can I ask you, were you sworn in at the beginning of the evening?
Yes, I was sworn in.
Okay, if you could give us your names, please.
My name is Michael Weiner. I have a business address of 6111 Boca Raton Parkway in Boca Raton, Florida. So I got 2 strikes against me. I'm wearing a pinstripe suit, and I am from across the border.
What's the second strike? I'm sorry.
A different county. I know that I'm coming at the end of the meeting, and I want to be quick. I sit on the Housing Leadership Council in Palm Beach County. We have clients down here. We have been observing what you have been doing. First of all, thank you very much for your housing policy in general. You have built a great number of apartment units, and imagine what the prices would be if you had not liberally used the density that was allocated to you. That was a great policy. Second of all, with respect to affordable housing, it's a very difficult issue. We see it all the time. Think of it. In order to provide affordable housing, this is really a community responsibility. But where does everybody always go? They go not just to the development community, they go to those people who are adding housing in the future that are part of the development community. So a great public burden is put on a very small sector. Now, that's okay. I get it. As people want to come in, they're going to have to pay to be able to get in. But imagine all the burden seems to fall on them. The finger is always pointed at them. I think that the policy that the county and the city came to is as fair as you can get, because anything further, more than likely, will be such a disincentive. And at that point, if you don't add housing units, both market rate and affordable, you're just going to increase the cost of the units that you've already developed. So I want to say thank you. We're watching your housing policy. I only wish I could convince most of Palm Beach County that heightened density doesn't destroy a community, it actually adds to it, but we appreciate what you did. Thank you.
Hey, one last question. Are you a land use attorney?
Yes, I am.
All right, that's your 3rd strike.
Oh, I forgot to mention that.
Sorry, I have one question for staff.
Hang on, let me
Yeah,
see.
okay.
Let me see if there's. Can I close the public
Yeah,
hearing?
sorry.
Is there anyone else from the public that would like to be heard on this item? Hearing, seeing none, public hearing's closed. Jay, you have a question for staff?
I do. The 10%, is that at what percentage of the area median income is that? It's 5 of it is 80% and 5 is 100%, right?
In this particular instance, that's a slightly different policy. In this particular instance, it's based upon the income category. So if you're going to be setting aside the units at 120% of the MFI, the requirement is 1 to 6. So it's a 14% set aside requirement. At 80% of MFI, the requirement is a 10% set aside. And at 50% of MFI, the requirement is 5% of all units set aside as affordable. So it's on a sliding basis in order to get the Geller units. The policy that you're referring to is either the additional height or density policy within the South Rack or the Northwest Rack. They're similar in nature, just different set-aside requirements.
So what is of all those different options, what was the lowest percentage of the area median income that?
50% of MFI. 50%,
Okay.
correct.
Got it. And maybe you could walk us through, like, how a 50%, and maybe you could walk us through what you just.
Sure. Let's just use 100 dwelling units. If you have 100 dwelling units, only 5 of the units would have to be set aside as affordable for 30 years at 50% of the median family income, and it would be deed restricted. So you can also choose an option where you can have the 80% level, and you would just have to increase the number of units set aside as affordable, but it's the same time period.
So for that 100 units, if you did 10 of them, then it would be 80% of AMI.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to add one more thing. I review development deals, nationally, and I think that, 10% of the units at 80% of the area median income is a really great place for us to start as a city, and I think it will encourage there to be affordable housing finally built here. So again, I support this. I move that we approve it.
Is there anybody else who would like to
Can I
voice an on this
second?
before we vote? Are there any additional comments from the board? You two are awfully chippy on these motions tonight. Holy smokes. John, would you like to say something?
No, they must have
I
something.
thought you were gonna make a
do.
motion.
He's already.
They're in a rush to get out of here.
Yeah, okay, so if there's nothing else, there's a motion on the floor and a second. Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none. Leslie, would you like to call the vote?
Yes. Mr. Scheckman,
Yes.
Mr. Bronco,
Yes.
Ms. Furtick,
Yes.
Mr. McTeague,
Yes.
Ms. McCartney,
Yes.
Mr. Gannon,
Yes.
Mr. Rotella,
Yes.
Chair Wayman.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. Okay, don't everybody get excited. We've got a presentation. Before you make your presentation, Tricia, so we can stay in order, is there a communication to the city commission? Does anybody have anything to communicate? Good night, boss. All right, hearing, seeing none. Tricia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Planning and Zoning Board board members. I'm used to presenting to the Historic Preservation Board, and I am presenting on a historic preservation topic. I'm going to talk to you tonight about the Strategic Historic Preservation Plan, which was prepared for the city of Fort Lauderdale using grant funds that were received last year. We received $50,000 from the state of Florida to prepare this plan. And it was something that was identified in the comprehensive plan for the city of Fort Lauderdale when it was adopted, I think last year. And it was our first goal within that plan. So we received $50,000 and we hired a consultant to work with us to do this. Part of the first step that we wanted to take to prepare this plan was to assess community values. So we did an online survey that was sent out to multiple residents through email, through to like the various civic associations. We also contacted community stakeholders that are involved with historic preservation efforts. We posted the information on the historic preservation website, the city's website, different social media outlets, and we then got over 250 responses. So we got a good gauge of what the community values were for historic preservation. We followed that up with 2 different community engagement events. One was online. It was a webinar to talk about historic preservation, what we were trying to achieve with this plan. And then we did an in-person workshop. We did 2 different times just to cater to different people that could attend either in the morning or evening. After we did that, we conducted additional interviews one-on-one, and then we also did a second community survey to gauge additional feedback once we had draft goals prepared. So just to give you an idea of what we were looking at in the beginning versus what we ended up with, after our first survey, we had initial results that ranked our goals of our preservation plan. We first had architectural resource surveys ranked first, then education, policies, and resilience. But as we moved through the process and got more feedback from the community, then we had resilience ranked first, then architectural resource surveys, then policies, then education. So that is the order in which our goals are today. Within the plan itself, we have 6 chapters. It provides background information about how we got there, information about historic preservation in Florida and the city of Fort Lauderdale, and then ultimately the actual plan itself is the final chapter. We identified the 4 goals, which I mentioned in the previous slide. We ended up with 11 objectives associated with those goals, and then 39 action items. So it's laid out here a little bit more detail regarding the different goals and objectives. And then just to give you an idea of what we're looking to achieve and how long we're looking to utilize to implement these different goals and objectives. We have everything divided into different time periods. So we have multiple action items that are ongoing that we're continuously addressing every single year. Some things we're looking to achieve in the near term, midterm, or long term, and this would all be over a 10-year period, more or less. And you can see in the breakdown, there's different percentages of each for each of the goals. And just to give you an idea of what the action items are for each of the goals, the first goal for resilience, one of the ongoing action items is to prepare an online toolbox, which would provide case studies and resources to the community to understand what the best practices are for resilience and adapting historic structures to sea level rise or wind mitigation and things like that. And then we also have applied for a grant to conduct a vulnerability study of all the historic properties within the city of Fort Lauderdale. So that would give us a better understanding of what is needed to protect historic properties moving forward with different threats of sea level rise and whatnot, and to really prepare ourselves better for resilience. And then for goal 2, for architectural resource surveys, that's something we've been ongoing for the past several years and going through the whole city to try to assess all properties and identify the significance of each of our neighborhoods and which properties are significant to those neighborhoods. So we'll continue to apply for grants for that. And then another aspect of this is we applied for a grant for the Sailboat Bend Civic Association specifically to address their archives. They have several archives that are located in the fire station museum. So those hopefully will be digitized with the help of that grant. And then we also are trying to give access to all of our survey results through an ArcGIS story map and through the city's website. So we'll continue to do that. With the policies, this is something that would more affect the Planning and Zoning Board, where anytime we're implementing policies, we would come before you to tell you about what we're working on, and that's how this is interrelated. So one of the items that we're working on now is to amend the Sailboat Bend Historic District Ordinance. So eventually, once we prepare that and go through the Historic Preservation Board, then that's something we bring before you. Oops, it just skipped ahead multiple slides. But with the goal 4, which is education, one example of something that we're working on currently is to support the school curriculum through the Fort Lauderdale Historical Society. So providing them information that can be shared with students that visit their museum campus on a regular basis. We also plan to provide brief presentations to the Historic Preservation Board members about different topics, either through a subject matter experts, other city agencies coming to their board meetings, or staff preparing in-depth presentations for them. We're also working on a special event for Archaeology Month, which is in March. So our next steps are really just to share this information with the community, like the Planning and Zoning Board. We made a presentation to the Historic Preservation Board a couple of months ago. And ultimately, we'd like to share this with the City Commission and just have the document accepted so it's something we can utilize moving forward. And every year, we're planning to do reporting. So we'd like to monitor our progress as we achieve the different action items. So we would prepare a report that would be shared with the Historic Preservation Board members every year and whoever else would like to access it. So that concludes my presentation. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I think last year we approved, or 2 years ago, a transferable development rights to incentivize historic preservation. How's that going?
We've only had one application so far for a historic property that has requested confirmation of how much density they have to transfer to a new development. but we haven't actually had a transfer yet.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Tricia.
Okay.
Nice evening.
You too.
Being that there's no other business before the board, is there a motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor? Good night.
So move.